Hello, everyone. Tracy here, your resident business rebel, and you're listening to Digital Business Your Way. Welcome to our special limited series, Launch Style Stories. In this series, we're diving deep into the true stories behind launching, what it's like to find your way the hard way, and what happens when you finally discover a launch style that fits. You'll hear from entrepreneurs who've been through, some miserable experiences, those who are still figuring it out, and those who found their groove and finally feel like they're thriving. Because launching isn't one size fits all, and there's not only one way to do it. And I believe it doesn't have to feel like denying yourself to make money or just feel exhausting and something that you have to get through. This series is all about exploring what works, what doesn't, and how you can cut through the guesswork quicker to find your way and your style sooner. So settle in, because these stories might just change the way you look at launching and your business.
I think that's where a lot of people get tripped up and where a lot of people start looking to the outside to figure out what the right path is, like what are the steps that I need to take or that I'm supposed to take, rather than also being like, well, what's going to work for me and what do I want to be doing and what business do I actually want to be running?
Today on Launch Style Stories, I'm joined by Frenchie Ferenczi, a strategist and advisor who helps entrepreneurs, creatives, and industry experts turn their ideas into action and action into results. She's worked with hundreds of clients, scaled $100 million businesses, and mentored over 1,000 entrepreneurs. But when it comes to launching, she's still experimenting. Frenchie and I dive into what it's like to not have a set launch style yet, why traditional launch formulas don't always fit, and how she's figuring out what works best for her energy, business, and audience. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by launch advice or unsure how to build a launch approach that actually works for you, this conversation is for you. Let's listen in. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm really excited because today I am joined by the incredible Frenchie, who is here to share her very our very real, our very candid thoughts on launching, right?
Yeah.
Because you and I, we are co-believers in this idea that every launch doesn't have to have that big giant L, as you say, right? It's like they don't all have to have the capital L. And we're going to explore what it's like to kind of figure out a launch approach that feels sustainable. Yeah. Especially if you are still finding your groove, because, a lot of the people that we've talked to on this series, through many years of trial and error, they figured out something that works, or they figured out the things that they want to do for now. But that's not the case for everybody. And that is okay. So what is it like whenever you're still in the middle of that, or when it's still like, oh my gosh, there's so much to explore? Do I want to find it? I don't know. So what are those perspectives? And, I just know that for you listening, this is really going to resonate, especially if you've ever felt overwhelmed or just kind of overstuffed with a lot of that kind of traditional advice out there.
Overstuffed.
It can
what
be
a
a
great
lot.
word.
Yes. Because I tell people all the time, it's like launching is just another word for promotion. That's all it is. It's just another action word for promotion, right?
Yep.
So there's a lot of that kind of when you get down to the root of these things. And you've been at this for a while, and you were corporate. You are, entrepreneur, like you had this lovely mix of stuff. So I'm curious with that mix, what was your first experience with launching, this online business style of launching like?
Yeah. Okay. So love this question, because my first launch ever was like 3 months after I started. And I went basically at the very start of my business, I took a very well-known course about making courses.
Yeah.
And I actually learned so much in that program. Like, I thought it was an excellent program. And I feel the need to say this before I start talking about the shitty parts. And so I learned so much from it. I think it's an excellent program. But because I had the background in corporate and I had spent 10 years having bosses like tell me what to do and me often ignoring my bosses, I was really good at looking at like a large swath of content and being like, this I don't need to do. This I probably should do. This is a maybe, take it or leave it. And so while it was my first launch, I knew it was my first launch. My email list had like maybe 50 people on it, most of whom were my family. I was like, I can't follow this step by step because that is too much time, energy, and anxiety, frankly, for a business of my size. But there were people in my cohort who were trying to do it all and who were burning out big time. And so I created a mini course. It was like $90. I sold 2 of them. I sold 2 real ones and one to my sister, who felt sorry for me.
Yeah. Hey, every bit counts.
She never went through it, but she wanted to support me, which I really appreciated.
Right.
And it was like this moment where I was like, okay, that was fine. I was frankly pleasantly surprised because I had no idea what would happen. But it started to open up for me 2 things. One is that sometimes the power of launching, yes, obviously we all want to make money and sell things. But when it's not that, you get other benefits. And that first launch is kind of what set the foundation for my business to really take off, because I think it shifted the perspective from people who had started to follow me or connect with me, that I wasn't just like this person they knew who was like doing this cute little business thing, but I was actually building something with a little bit more oomph and kind of meat to it. And that was a really interesting learning from that very first launch.
Yeah. Right. And it's like you feel like, okay, here is this playbook that we need to follow, which can have that comfort to it, right? Whenever you're not really sure what to do and everything feels so new, that there's the overwhelmingness of too many options.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have that prescription, but then we also will feel very suffocated by the prescription. And it's like, okay, hang on, what are we supposed to do? Especially when we come with our bags of life that we've lived before this moment, right?
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I feel about I roll my eyes anytime somebody talks about SMART goals. I'm like, if one more person tells me to do a mother loving SMART goal, I'm going to throw something, right? Because we had to do those in corporate, and I managed a team. And so our goals had to, be aligned for our individual job, for our department, for all the way up to corporate. Not one single person looked at those. Nobody cared. So I'm like, come on, and again, that's my baggage. It's not at all like they don't have value, right? But it's those little things that we have to be honest about that we come with. And it's like, okay, how are we going to then use this for ourselves? Right. Yep. So you knew, you were like, okay, I need to kind of go out and look at this more. Yeah. And I need to pull out the pieces. And a lot of that is knowing yourself and trusting yourself.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of like you can have this nervousness, you can have this excitement of building this new thing, but also like, well, hang on, I'm not a new person. I still have my stuff. I still know what I'm doing. So where can I feel into this? Where can I trust myself and be like, that sounds like a great idea, but maybe for later, not for right now. Yeah. Right. And pull into this. And so what you found then was that you could do this own mini version for yourself that then set, as you said, the foundation for your business. Yeah. Right. So do you think that like proved to yourself as well as to those on the outside that like, oh, I'm building something like good here and not just playing around, as you say?
I definitely think that for me, it just felt like that leap, right? Where rather than, being in that phase and stage of like, I'm doing this, it was like, look at this thing I made. And I think shifting that language was actually very empowering to me. To be like, no, this is real. This is something. And maybe this is not. And I never sold that course again, by the way. It's not like I was like, and then 3 years later, I made $8 million on that course. Like, no, I never sold it again. Like, didn't feel aligned with like what I really wanted to do and the way that I wanted to serve people and all those things. So it's not like, I feel like a lot of times what we hear is like, only 2 people bought it the first time. And then 3 years later and I'm a multi-gajillionaire and I bought, I retired my husband or whatever. Like, that's not quite what happened. But it did just start to give me more space and freedom to test and to experiment. And I think that's where a lot of people get tripped up and where a lot of people start looking to the outside to figure out what the right path is. Like, what are the steps that I need to take or that I'm supposed to take, rather than also being like, well, what's going to work for me and what do I want to be doing and what business do I actually want to be running and like building, running, so on and so forth. And so I think the pride that came along with putting something out there was really motivating and empowering to me, because then I was like, well, I did one launch. I can do another one. Let me just try something else. Let me figure out what else I can do. And that particular launch, I was like, I remember being like, I'm not doing a webinar launch. Like, I don't even have anyone in my audience. Like, what am I going to do? Have 3 people come like and then make a pitch at the end of it? Like, no. And I did just email, and it was fine for what it was at that moment in time. But making those intentional choices to opt in or opt out, I think was really wise, and frankly set me up to also realize that every step along the way, I had the choice to opt in or opt out.
Yes. Right. And that is that big realization, and that I think that like helps you feel kind of that being adult again, right? It's like that in the control again. It's like, oh, I get to choose. This is a menu of options. This is good advice, but this is like, asking the server, well, what's your favorite thing on the menu? And then being like, oh, well, that sounds great for you, but I really don't want that anyway. So what else can I have? Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
And that, I love that concept. And something else that you mentioned in the first comment was the idea of the list and the business age. Because you were saying that like the other people that were in your cohort, that they were going for it, and you were going, half these people are my family. My sister basically gave me like, an early birthday present by buying this for me, right? She's like, obligation ticked,
Yeah, exactly.
I got this, so it's like, where do you see that fitting overall? Right? Not just back then, but that really continues over and over again with these iterations of our business, that we have to have that alignment with the list. We have to have that alignment with the business age. And it doesn't mean that you can't shoot for whatever, but there's a mix there.
Yeah. Well, I don't remember how long ago I posted this, but I remember posting something on Instagram that's like, it was like a riff on act your age, not your shoe size, but it was like, act your business age. And I think there is something to that. Like, I was in this program and it was like, at the checkout, you could do an order bump and get like, for only $247, you can get our webinar templates. Great. Love a webinar template. It was like 200 slides.
Oh.
Like to create that content. Okay.
Yeah.
Then to actually like practice your delivery of that many slides. Right? All those sorts of things. So anyways, I think that in terms of the age, and there is this balance, which you're kind of alluding to, which is like, I'm not telling anyone to dream small, right? Or to like let go of your big vision or all that sort of thing. But we also need to understand our own intrinsic motivation. And like, if you said, I once had a client come to me and she was in network marketing, and she was the only person in network marketing I ever worked with and probably ever will, because it's just a different world that I don't understand. But she was making like $750 a month. And she was like, in 3 months, I want to be making $10,000 a month. And at the risk of being like a total Grinch, I was like, I don't think that's possible. Like, I don't know based on the, it's not like she had like an audience of 50,000 hanging out that she just like wasn't leveraging. Like, no, none of those inputs were there. And so I think a lot of times there is some toxic language around building your mindset in a certain way and believing in yourself. And that is true. But we also have to look at the facts and the data points that we have, which is like, you can believe in yourself so much and you can have all the confidence in the world. And that might help you increase your conversion percent. But odds are that's not going to take you from an average, let's say 5% conversion on your list size to 35%.
Yeah. And it's not going to change it if your list size is still the same, right? It's like going from 5 to 35% is amazing, and it is possible because you want better conversion, have a better audience.
Yeah.
Right? So there are tweaks, there are things that you can do, but the money flow depends then on, okay, well, great. How big is 35%? Is that 35 people? Is that 3,500 people? Like, what are we talking about here? And then, of course, the price point of the actual thing. Are you selling $35, $97, $9,700? Right?
Yeah.
It's like the people who are like, I'm making $10,000 months. Yes, my one item is $10,000. And it's like, so you're making one sell a month. Hang on now.
Right. Yeah. Which, like, no shade, but let's like be honest about it.
Exactly, right? Because there's that balance of volume with experience versus price point versus, and so whenever people are seeking out these vanity metrics and, for the sake of like making the post or feeling like it's the only way to catch up, or when they have been told or made to feel like that is how they are legitimate in business, is to hit these certain tick points, then they're like, okay, well then how do I get there? How quickly do I get there? What do I make this happen? Right. And that's seeking validation versus making the sustainable business and building this foundation.
Totally. I made my first 6-figure year, my list was under 500. Right. So I'm not saying, right, I would never be the person
it's totally possible. Right.
Yeah. And so it's not like, no, you need to have a big audience, but you got to do the math. Like, what am I charging? How many people do I need to sell it to? And then what steps am I going to take? And what priorities am I going to set to sell it to those people? So I think that's a big piece. And, one thing that just came to mind as we were talking through this is also like, we have to know our own capacity in a way that I think sometimes people do not. And so I went on to do 7 launches of a program that I did repeatedly, not in 1 year, but like over a few years.
Oh, I thought that's what you were about to say. I was like, oh, Lord.
No. But one thing that I happen to be good at and fast at is email writing. Yeah. So that like big burden of launching and writing emails that can often be like the limitation for some people is one of those things that's like, air quotes, easy for me. I say that not to be like, look at me, I'm just really good at writing emails, but there are skills that I am less good at, right? And so like I'm not as good at a webinar sale as other people. I tend to over deliver in webinars or do other things in webinars or feel awkward kind of like transitioning into the pitch or all of those sorts of things. And so I think in terms of personalizing our launches to ourselves and to our own skills, it's also about understanding that like, where can I like use the skills I already have? To your point, I'm not a new person, to help me achieve my goals more effectively. And where can I pull back, even if that's like what, when I don't do live launches, I have a lot of people be like, the only way to convert is a live launch. And I'm like, well, then why are none of the people on the webinar converting and everyone's coming from my email list?
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Because it's like, okay, hang on. Then there has to be other factors to this conversion. Right. Oh, okay. It's actually touch points. It's feeling my energy, like energy meaning like that emotional connection with me.
Yeah.
It's like, where are we having that kind of connection where people are like, oh my God, I see you. I feel you. You see me. You feel me. I want in.
Yep.
Well, maybe you don't deliver that if you're sitting here talking like this on a webinar because you're so scared to death you don't know what to do, right? But whenever for you, like you're sitting there in that email flow and you're just typing it out and you're like, ha, this is so funny, and that exactly comes through as you're typing that, right? And what is that for people? But here's the part that I want to make sure that, you who are listening, you only know that if you try it.
Yep.
Right? But trying it doesn't mean you have to go through a 3-month launch in order to figure it out.
Yep.
You can also try it through practicing. Like you can try it on. You can experiment with it, right? Yeah. Like Frenchie, you just said that you did a mini course with a mini launch the first time. So how many elements that you did with your $97, never to be seen again, 3 people bought it, how many of those things where you're like, I tried these things. I like these things. Dear Lord, never asked me to do these things again. Like, do you even remember what elements that you pulled out whenever you made that guy public?
Yeah. I mean, one thing I hated, which is kind of interesting because now I'm actually exploring a self-paced course again, but I hated recording the content. I love teaching a live workshop. I love teaching live because I can I feel like there's a feedback loop with the people in the room. But when I'm just like sitting there, feel like I need to say the script perfectly and I'm at my computer and I'm just looking at myself like in the little box. And then it's like that part I did not like. Right. So that was also like, and I felt less proud of the output where I knew that if I was teaching something live, which is what I did in my later launches, I could feel like really confident that I would be able to like personalize things and answer people's questions and make sure that even if something wasn't perfectly clear in the content, that they could get a lot out of it. And so I think I was also able to sell with more confidence on the back end of that.
Yeah. So in the first one, did you pull out email? Like, were you like trying your hand at the sequences? Were you trying the webinar style? Were you doing like a launch event? Okay.
Just did email, did like a 5-day open cart. And this is where to my point of the execution, I think I wrote all the emails. Like I did the 2 emails a day type of thing for that amount of time. Maybe I did a little bit less than 2 per day, right? But I did that part, but I did not do a live launch or anything like that. The other thing I hated was trying to come up with bonuses.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, do people like, is this really a thing? Especially in what I do. I've been thinking a lot about bonuses recently. I'm like, what bonuses attract me? And I'm like, templates, like really practical, tactical things are what tend to be the most exciting to me. But I didn't necessarily know what those would be at the time. And I just was like, bonuses, do I have to do that? And then it felt so silly because I was like, no one's going to buy this anyways. The only thing I'll say is that even if you're like, no one's going to buy this, and this is where I think we have to think about other benefits, I gave it my best shot within my boundaries that I had set. And I tried to make it as, robust as I felt comfortable with. And I still think that helped me feel more confident later because I was like, I still gave it my all rather than being like, well, no one's going to buy it, so it doesn't matter if it's crap. Like, no, I wanted it to be like in integrity with my values, even if nobody bought it.
Yeah. Right. Like you found those parameters of like, okay, well, but where can I make my push? You know, where can I like kind of step out of that comfort zone bit? But yet I know I'm not stepping into someone else's. Yeah. I'm still being me, but I'm getting stretchy, right?
Yep.
Which is a good thing. Getting stretchy, having that experimentation, that is entrepreneurship. Yeah. Yep. And bonuses, they're there to get people the results in a way that make them feel like they can do it.
Yeah.
Right. So a bonus is like, if someone doesn't feel like they're ready yet for that result, or how can they get it quicker? Or what else can I do so that way I can kind of solidify that end part that they need, but yet it's not a hardcore portion of the curriculum. And I think a lot of that in our industry is people are like, oh, I'm doing a fake promotion marketing, quote unquote, value stacking. And it's like, well, hang on, that's not actually what we're supposed to be doing. Like if you are sitting here and you're teaching a business course, don't have your bonus about how to make 35 balloon animals because it's a $50, value. Right. And it's like, wait, no, like these have to make sense with what we're doing. It has to be real money. Like that is a legal requirement. They have to actually be valuable.
Yeah.
And, and it has to be something that like makes people believe in themselves that they can do it and that it makes that road a bit smoother for them. Right. So it's like, okay, well, what else can I think about? What else can be there? And when we like take it away from that, and I'll say false marketing concept, because it's not fair to marketing to say that it was ever intended to be on its shoulders, but that's how some people teach it. That like when they think that it's just there for the sake of creating some sort of, promotion fallacy. But when you actually look at it from the audience perspective and from them getting their thing, then it's like, oh, well, what else can I give them? So like when you're thinking, oh, what would I actually use? What would I actually found valuable to help me get this? Oh, templates, because that makes my life easier. Oh, these kind of things are fun. Well, what kind of things are fun for me?
Yep.
So as people are listening to this, it's like, well, how can I reframe these bonuses? What else can I give them? So it's not about the money and it's not about bloating this value that people are getting, but it's about actually the human who's buying it feeling like it's possible for them and that they can believe in themselves when getting it. Right.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of shifting that around that makes our brains kind of think in a different way. Yeah. Totally. And it makes it a little bit fun to come around it. But a couple of the words that I use is also what you and I know for industry lingo falls under product market fit, right? Like not selling a business course to non-party children or like non-party clown, whatever. I was trying to say something about the balloon animals again, and then I totally lost that. But right, it's where do you see is something that like people just kind of get it wrong, or you wish they knew this. You wish that this was like a cornerstone that was taught by more than just people like you and me and like our handful of friends that we know.
Yeah, that are aligned with us. So
yeah,
I think one of the ideas and concepts that really stands out to me is this idea of like the customer journey and actually thinking about sales, not as like, basically, I think that a lot of the marketing, messaging, coaching, so on and so forth, becomes very egocentric. It's about like people buying my stuff rather than kind of tied into this idea of product market fit. How am I actually delivering something of value to others, right? And really flipping the script on that. And so it's like, this whole idea of like getting people to buy, air quotes around getting, because it's not about getting anyone to buy. It's about really showing the value, and then people can make their own choices. And I think a lot of times customer journey, I don't mean like the ascension ladder and how you just like get them, again, air quotes, get them to buy more from you. But like, where are they in their buyer journey? Are you really speaking to the person? How much empathy and understanding do you have for the people that you are serving? And how are you really speaking to that? And then what does it look like for them once they do start to engage with you? Like, I recently had somebody comment on a Facebook post, seemed innocent, and then DM me, add me as a friend, I accepted, DM me something that was like, oh, wow, I'm so impressed you got into coaching or whatever, which I was like, if you read my stuff, you would see I don't call myself a coach, but fine. And then like 2 days later was like, I think your content is really great, but I see like a lot of rooms for optimizations. Do you want any, like, can I share some of my thoughts with you? And I just was like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
And she never replied, which, but I'm saying that because it's like, that is very much of like the one trick pony. Everyone is a lead. I'm going to treat them as such. And like, if they're not in my funnel, they're not a person, so on and so forth.
Yep.
And I think we just need to be more intentional about like, what does nurturing our people actually look like? How much time does it take in general? If you look at your business history, what has been the timeline between somebody joining your list and actually buying something from you, of the people who do buy? And then like, what have the lurkers done for you? Because your lurkers could be doing a lot of work for you, even if you don't realize it.
Yeah.
So I think that there's just a lot of times it's about my launch, my content, putting it out there, my products, my offers. And it's actually like not about the relationship that we're building with our audience. And that to me is like just such a big gap.
Very much so. Very much. Yeah. And that's what we say, in my community, that it's always that connection over transaction, right? Yeah. And that sales is not about you, it's about the other person. Yeah. And we have to constantly make that flip. Every single message, every single thing that you do, it's not about somebody being convinced that they need to buy from you. It's someone else's belief that they can actually make it happen.
Yeah.
And it's like, what do they need to know that they actually can do that thing? Because that thing feels really big. It feels exciting. It feels hopeful. It feels possible. But it's also like, is it sustainable? What are other people going to say once I do it? What's my life going to look like? Yeah. That old hat, better the devil you know than the one you don't, like that exists for a reason, right? Yeah. People might not like it, but they stay in that same area that they are in because they don't know what the other one looks like.
Yeah.
While at the same time, where grass is always greener. And so we are these dynamic human beings where both things are true at the same time.
Yeah.
And if you go, well, how does that work in my community? Well, look at yourself and just like jot down the contradicting thoughts that you have on a daily basis about every single thing that you do. And then be like, wow, how much are my buyers like me?
Yeah.
How much were they at some point? At where do we intersect, right? Because sometimes we are working with variations of ourselves, and sometimes there's just like little tangentials, and other times the only thing we have in common is that we're all humans, right? Yeah. But there's these parts to us where it's like, how is it that I can really want this one thing, but at the same time I'm scared to death to have that thing? Mm-hmm. And that's the part that we have to make that connection with. Because it's not about like, hey, everybody, look at me. I'm the best person in the world to buy from. And when you join me, everything is magic. Versus it's like, no, I see that you are scared to make this change, but I believe that you can do it. Let's actually show you how you make it possible in your world. Yeah. And this is what it's like when I join you, not when you're joining me. And making that change in your language and how you make your offers and all the things that you do, that makes all the difference in your sales.
Right.
It's my little soapbox.
I think it's so important. And I would say the only thing that I would add or layer onto this is that a lot of times we can feel like we have to guess, right? Like this is all subjective. Like, know your data. Look at the information that you have. We have a lot of insights around our customers, their behavior, whether it's qualitative and it's more like understanding where's the gap between what they say they want and how they're acting, right? That's like a typical one. versus the actual numbers of, how many people are actually in my audience, so on and so forth. And I think there's this weird thing of like, the best entrepreneurs don't have all the answers. They just know how to ask the right questions and find the answers. Yeah. And usually that's by understanding your data or the data that you have.
So let's talk about that a little bit more, because, I think that is a part that is missing in a lot of people's processes, right? Yeah. So do you have kind of an idea of where somebody can start, or maybe they have followed a prescription and it doesn't really make sense. Maybe they know to do a debrief, or they know to do these certain little things, and they're like, great, but what does this actually mean? And I'm kind of scared to hold my hand up and say, I don't really know what to do with this information.
Yeah, 1,000%. I think one of the biggest gaps that I just see in people's like data hunts, one is that they're not starting with a question. What is the question that you want to answer? Right? So let's say I used this example earlier. My question is, how long is somebody on my email list before they convert? Right? So then what I would want to look at is, what is who on my email list converted? When did they convert? When did they subscribe? And then I can start to get an understanding of what the average sales cycle is for that person. So I think we tend to start by trying to interpret the numbers, but we actually need to start with the question we want to answer. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a really, really helpful tool. I think the other piece is that people are like, well, nobody's going to tell me this, right? Especially when it comes to qualitative data. And it's like generally true. People are kinder and less direct unless they're trolls on the internet.
Which can be useful when used right.
Exactly. And so a lot of times we need to be interpreting people's words and behaviors, or understanding like the subtext behind it, or asking follow-up questions on the qualitative side. So like maybe, let's just think about bonuses. What people say they want is, I'm going to talk about nutrition. They want to eat 100 grams of protein a day. What they're actually doing is only eating 20 grams of protein a day. Like, how can I create tools that bridges the gap between that? Like, I have access to the information of their goals. I have access to the information of what they're eating. How do I bridge the gap between these two things for them? Because I see the gap. And that's where the people start to feel, I think, really seen, and where you start to find that product market fit. Because the problem is not knowing that they should, air quotes, should eat 100 grams of protein a day. I'm thinking about 100 grams because that's my goal right now. Is most people who have that interest know the number. They just don't know how to get there. So how are you getting them there? So anyways, I don't know if that really answers it, but definitely think about the question you want to ask more than just looking at the numbers. And I think second is like, where are the gaps in behavior, and really like looking at the subtext. And I think the third thing is to find could be a whole lesson in and of itself. But is to know the difference between your leading and lagging indicators. What starts to give you early insights that something is working or not working? And so I had my 7th launch of these launches that I talked about last April. 0 people signed up, which was like crazy because it was like signature program, 7th launch, all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously, the market changed a lot, all that sort of thing. But when I look back, I had been doing a lot of pre-launching and planting seeds like for maybe 6 weeks before the launch, and nobody was clicking. Nobody was like doing the things. Like that was my cue. Like something's not working here anymore, right? But I didn't pay attention to that. So then I waited for the lagging indicator sales to come through.
Yeah.
The sales were $0. And so I lost that time. So we have to I share that because a lot of times we do get early indicators of something working or not. And we want to be more attentive to those early indicators. Yes. Because what happens when we wait for the lagging indicators, is that then we've lost time.
Yes. Yeah. And your point 3 will help with your point 2. So 3, whenever you're talking about those leading indicators, and it's like, okay, hang on, things aren't clicking. Now let me look at these parts too. This is the gap.
Yep.
Everybody knows those shoulds, right? Sometimes they eye roll. Sometimes they wake up going, today's going to be the day I'm going to get my 100 grams. And it's like, okay, but my old content is still preaching that everybody needs 100 grams. And here's why. Okay, well, everybody's glazing over because they know that part. Yeah. I haven't filled in the here's how.
Right.
Here's these steps. This is what it looks like broken into the major meals and the minor meals that you have a day. These are alternative ways that you can get 100 grams. Yes, you actually get 100 grams in your morning coffee. Here's how. Like here's all these little pieces that now people are clicking. Now I notice from this leading indicator, right, where I wasn't getting the bites in my pre-launch was because I had the old message going. Here's my gap. Right.
Yeah.
So that is like that carryover example of how these two fit together, especially whenever we're in the middle of launching. Right.
Totally.
And it doesn't have to be something where we're going, okay, I have to set aside a week. I need to go on a retreat. I got to figure this out. It can be something like going, okay, hang on, I've done this before. Or maybe even if you haven't, maybe it's a brand new launch and it's like, I thought this was a killer message. I've given it time, right? It's not 7 minutes since I've hit send. I've given it, some time to get people's reactions, to get comments, to get replies, to get clicks, and there still haven't been any. What are these conversations going?
Yeah.
What am I glazing over? Am I too over here and everybody's on this other side? Am I talking about the shoulds that people know and they're over the what I'm supposed to do? And I need to go deeper into the how they should do it, right? And we can pull these little things apart. And I mean, we just did that in 3 minutes. But, you could probably do this in a good 15-minute brain dump.
Yeah.
And come up with some new hooks and some new angles, because that's the fancy terms that seem daunting for what we just did, And then now it's like, great, let's crank out some other things. Okay, I can make some posts. I can write an email. I can do a quick live. I can do a whatever, it feels exciting for you, right? And now let's see what people are getting excited about. Now let's see what's going, okay, they're excited about the, random ways that you can get this in your day. Here's how to bump up an extra 25 grams.
Yep.
Those kind of things pull in and it's like, oh, that was actually fun for me too now, right? Because it gets those juices going.
Totally. I love that.
It gets to be a little bit more prescriptive, but that's a way to kind of go, okay, hang on, here's a warning sign. I don't have to wait till later, but now what can I go ahead and do about it? Now let me go ahead and examine what I've got, right? Yeah. So I wanted to kind of pull that out because you were talking about the kind of things that people are missing. And, one of the things that's really important to me is like, helping people understand the foundations and the roots of these topics versus just, some Instagram quote that someone says and then says and then says, about this.
Sounds really
but
nice.
But what does it really take for sustainable business? But also to break it down into something that's tangible.
Yeah.
Right. And whenever it comes to launching, there's so many opinions, there's so many ideas, but that's actually a good thing. Yeah. And I hope that you listening, that you hear from what Frenchie's saying and from, what I'm talking about, that is actually your permission slip to try it, to do whatever. There's a reason that there's so many ideas. There's a reason that there's so many opinions about it, because the people have gone out there and they've done it. Yeah. So you can go out there and do it too, because there's not just one way. There's lots of little fun ways to try it. So is there like one thing that you would love to leave people with, whether it has to do with lagging, leading, or anything else?
I think ask the right questions. And I know that's vague, but like specifically, it's like, yes, do the experiments and then try to learn fast. So know what question you're trying to answer and then use as much as you can, pair your facts with your feelings, because that's where the wisdom is.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Because it's so important to have that balance, right? Exactly. and to look at that, I use the word energy, but I mean it in the sense of like emotions there, and that's a big part of what we focus on in your launch style. It's figuring out where you are and designing that strategy for what fits your business, your goals, your energy. How does it work with your community? How does it work with your offers? Right. And finding that pairing for the season you're in and for what it is that you want to do. So for everybody listening, if there's one thing that you can start doing today to rethink that launch, it's like, what is that question that you want? And feel free to ask your peers. Feel free to even ask, your lovely GPT if you want, but it's like, what are those things that it's like, I wish I would have even known to ask this question, because that's really important. And, and Frenchie would love to geek out with you on any of these data points as well.
Sure.
We're always down to talk about
more
this
questions
kind of
than you ever wanted anybody to ask you.
Right? It's like we will pull out all of these pieces because it's fun. But thank you very much, Frenchie, for being here and for sharing that journey and for that perspective. Because, it's an important reminder that launching's not overwhelming. It's sure as hell isn't perfect. It just needs to work for you. It needs to work for where you're at, for your audience, and, for your offer. Yeah. Right. And if you're listening and you feel like it's time to find your own launch style, please join us. You don't have to go through years of trial and error. We can give you a jump start inside of your launch style at tracypatterson.com/YLS. And together we'll create something that feels a bit more like home, right? Thank you.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Launch Style Stories, and I hope it sparked something for you. If you've been listening and thinking, I need to find my way to launch without burning out, second guessing, or forcing myself into someone else's formula, well, that's exactly what your launch style is here to help with. Inside the program, we cut the trial and error and help you create a launch approach that fits your strengths, your business, and your energy, so selling never feels like an uphill battle again. Head to tracypatterson.com/YLS to learn more and join us. And if you loved this series, let me know. Share your biggest takeaway, DM me, or leave a review. It helps more business owners like you find the show. I'll see you inside your launch style.